Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now there's a name. He's one of world literature's most profound and, let's be real, most perplexing figures. His novels, they aren't just stories. They're basically battlegrounds for the deepest questions of our existence. Faith, doubt, freedom, morality. So let's dive into the suffering that forged this absolute master of the human soul.
And Dostoevsky himself, well, he hands us the key to his entire universe with this one single, pretty chilling quote. He truly believed there was this unbreakable link between suffering and creativity, that to really get it, to write about the human condition, you had to live through its darkest moments. And that right there is the central theme we're going to explore.
So that kind of begs the question, doesn't it? What kind of suffering are we actually talking about here? This isn't just about, having a bad day. We're on the quest to understand the unbelievable, life-altering forces that shaped one of the greatest writers in all of history.
Okay, so to start, you've got to understand that Dostoevsky himself is a puzzle. His characters are literally walking, talking philosophical debates. You'll have these devout believers right next to cynical atheists, and he gives both sides such powerful, convincing voices that for centuries people have been arguing about what Dostoevsky himself actually believed. So who was this guy really? Well, he was a 19th century Russian novelist whose insight into human psychology was so deep it was almost prophetic. His books are these arenas where faith and doubt just clash, where freedom and morality go to war. And what's truly incredible is that he basically laid the groundwork for existentialism, a huge philosophical movement of the 20th century, way before it even had a name.
Now, to get any of this, we have to go back to a single horrifying event that completely shattered and then rebuilt his entire world. This is the moment right here that transformed him from just a promising young writer into a true philosophical giant. Just look at this timeline from 1849. It's insane. In April, he gets arrested just for talking about socialist ideas. By November, boom, he's sentenced to death. Then, in December, they lead him out into a freezing square, blindfold him, tie him to a stake. He hears the shots as the first group of prisoners is executed. He's next. He figures he has minutes, maybe seconds left to live. He says his goodbyes, closes his eyes, and then, at the absolute last second, a messenger rides in. The Tsar has changed his sentence. It was all a show, a mock execution designed to create pure, absolute terror. But his reprieve, it wasn't freedom. It was this. 4 years of hard labor in a Siberian prison camp. You could call it a different kind of death sentence. But it was in this frozen hell that Dostoevsky would be reborn. See, that prison sentence wasn't just punishment. For Dostoevsky, it turned into this profound spiritual and philosophical education. It completely reshaped his entire understanding of suffering, of faith, and of humanity itself. This experience brought him face to face with a really powerful concept in Russian Orthodoxy, kenoticism. It's this core idea about self-emptying. The belief is that suffering, if you embrace it with humility, can actually transform you and lead to redemption. In Siberia, surrounded by convicts, Dostoevsky saw this in action, people enduring unimaginable pain with a kind of selfless love that brought him back to the faith he'd known as a child. And out of that experience, his central philosophy was born, what we can call his moral dialectic. He came to believe that every single one of us is constantly caught in this tug of war between two choices. On one side, you've got your ego, your own self-will, just wanting what it wants. And on the other, you have a path of selfless, divine love. This conflict, well, it's the engine that drives all of his greatest characters. This quote from a letter he wrote after prison, wow. It says everything about his transformation. Before, he was an intellectual searching for rational, provable truth. Afterwards, his faith wasn't about logic anymore. It was about the profound, subjective experience of love and grace that he found right in the middle of all that suffering. He'd rather stick with that feeling than with any cold, hard fact. So, how did these huge ideas actually play out? Well, forged in the fires of Siberia, they became the lifeblood of his most famous novels. He basically used fiction to test his philosophy in the laboratory of the human soul. Okay, first up, Notes from Underground. The Underground Man is one of the most influential characters in all of literature. This guy rebels against everything, logic, society, you name it. He argues that what people really truly want isn't happiness or reason. It's the absolute, even if it's self-destructive, freedom to choose for themselves. Just to prove they aren't, just piano keys being played by the laws of nature. And then comes his masterpiece, Crime and Punishment.
The main character, Raskolnikov, is basically a living, breathing case study of that moral dialectic we were talking about. He murders someone to prove he's an extraordinary man, that he's above morality, a pure act of self-will. The rest of the novel is just the devastating, soul-crushing fallout from that one choice. And Dostoevsky, like the genius he is, brilliantly shows us the two paths available to Raskolnikov through two other characters. You have Svidrigailov, who's like a dark mirror, a man who has fully given into his ego, and his journey ends in total emptiness and suicide. Then on the other side, you have Sonia. She embodies that canonic, selfless suffering, and she offers him a path, not to happiness, but to redemption by accepting his suffering. And we have to remember, this wasn't just some abstract philosophical game for him. Dostoevsky was a man plagued by his own demons. He had a terrible gambling addiction that left him in crushing debt pretty much his whole life. He actually wrote a whole book, The Gambler, in a frantic 30-day sprint just to pay off a publisher. His own struggles gave his writing this brutal, undeniable authenticity. So here's the really crucial point. These ideas, born in the 19th century, they didn't just stay there. No way. They became the essential groundwork for one of the most important philosophical movements of the 20th century. And that movement is existentialism. At its core, it's all about individual freedom, responsibility, and this search for meaning in a world that doesn't just hand you a purpose. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus were wrestling with these exact same themes. And this slide just lays it out so perfectly. Look at the direct lines you can draw between Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground and Albert Camus' The Outsider, a cornerstone of existentialism. The deep alienation? Check. The rejection of reason? Check. Portraying the justice system as this absurd theater? Double check. It is all there in Dostoevsky, decades and decades earlier. I mean, it's no wonder the great philosopher Walter Kaufmann just came right out and called Notes from Underground the best introduction to existentialism that had ever been written. Dostoevsky wasn't just writing novels, he was mapping the future of philosophical thought. Which leaves us right back where we started, with the same question that haunted Dostoevsky and all of his characters. What is true freedom, really? Is it the radical right to choose absolutely anything you want, even your own destruction? Or is true freedom found in the strength to choose a path of love and selflessness, even when it means you have to suffer? That is the dilemma he leaves for every single one of us to ponder.